Awesome. So good morning, everyone. It looks like we still have a few more people joining. Quite the turnout this morning. And if you're having any issues with my audio, so you're not able to hear me at all, feel free to chat that in. Everyone's mic is currently muted, so I'll be paying attention to the chat mainly. And let me go ahead and I can share my screen here. Let's see. Awesome. So is everyone able to see my PowerPoint now? Just kind of waiting for a response here. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Heather. Sweet. So 11 o'clock on the dot. I'll try to be very punctual about the entire webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. So today's webinar will be about purchasing an eMaint, and I will be teaching it. My name is Gerald Barnett, and I am a Tier 2 customer support specialist with eMaint. Now, let's first go over a few housekeeping items. So number one, phones will be muted during the webinar today. So if you have any questions during the session, feel free to type those into your chat session, and I will answer those in the last 15 minutes of the webinar. But if there's any question that is relevant to the current topic, I'll do my best to answer it as we move along. Now, so poll time. I'm going to go ahead and send out a poll. Now, the poll question is, are you currently using purchasing in X4? I just want to kind of get a sense of where everyone stands. So you should now be receiving the poll. Just go ahead and either vote yes or no as a response. Cool. I'll give you just a minute to answer that one. A lot of new users, but that's great. We're almost at 80% participation. Looks like someone retracted their vote. Nice. A few more seconds here. Perfect. So it looks like we have 63% of users in the webinar having never used purchasing in eMaint, which is great. So hopefully after today's training session, you'll be a bit more comfortable using it, and maybe you'll have a few more questions for us at the end. So moving forward, let's just take a look at our agenda. So we're going to talk about setting up suppliers in eMaint. We'll talk about actually creating your purchase orders, the different methods of doing so. We'll then get into actually receiving the items on the PO, and then we'll talk about actually returning items when you need to. We'll get into purchasing and work orders and the relationship between the two, and then we're going to close out our session with questions. Great. Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started, and we can jump directly into eMaint. Now, so suppliers in eMaint. So when you need to create a supplier in eMaint, those are stored as contact records. So the first place you're going to want to start in eMaint is your contact table. So from your contact table, you can go ahead and add a new record, and then you can start filling in the information for your suppliers. Awesome. I'm watching those chat questions as we move along. Now, your contact ID does not matter in this case for a supplier, the same way it matters if you're creating a contact for one of your users. So you could use any random number. You can use the shortened version of their name, whatever you feel here. For your category, you should have suppliers at default, but you're not required to use supplier, so you can use any category you want. And then you would just go through and fill out any additional information that you have about your supplier. So for example, I will fill out a supplier for a fictitious company that I just created. So my supplier point of contact is going to be myself. Go ahead and type in the company's name, which is Gerald Supply Co. Add in the email address. Okay. I'll add the shipping address. Cool, and then that looks good. That's really all I'm going to need for my supplier. Very basic information, but of course you can go more in depth in this if you need to. Oops, already have that contact. Perfect. So now that you have a supplier created, the next step you're going to want to set up is actually associating that supplier with a part. So this is assuming that you already have the parts in the system created that you'll need. So if you go to any one of those parts, say for example, I'll use this mounted ball bearing. If you go to that inventory item and you switch to your related table section, depending on your layout options, your related tables may be in a different area. So you may have them as tabs, they may be below your record altogether, but nonetheless, the related table that you'll be looking for is called item suppliers. So I'll show that to you here. Sorry about that. So I'm looking at my part, and then I'm just scrolling down to my item suppliers related table, and then I can add a new record. Now, it's important when creating parts in eMaint, especially those that you're planning to purchase, that you set up at least one default supplier record. So that's what I'm showing you here, how you create that default supplier record. So on your new record, the first thing you'll want to fill out is the supplier ID. So you're going to use a lookup indicated by the magnifying glass icon here. That will take you to your contacts table. Now I will search for the contact that I just created. Awesome, so here's my Gerald Supplier Company. So I can go ahead and select that and apply my changes. If I have any additional information about this supplier, so any specific supplier part number, manufacturer part number, I could fill that out at this point. So let's say my supplier part number is 123 ABC. Let's say I also have a manufacturer part number, so 432 CDA. And then my manufacturer, I'll say is Gerald Manufacturing Co. Now, to actually mark this supplier as a default, there's a field at the bottom called default here. You just want to make sure you check that is true. It's like I said, it's very important that you have at least one supplier here that is default. But if you need any additional suppliers, you can go back and you can add those. Just keep the default set to false. So here you can see I have my one default supplier, Gerald Supply Co., and then I have a secondary supplier, H&R Electric. Once you actually create your default supplier, you'll notice that a few fields on your inventory item will be updated. So that's going to update your default supplier fields, supplier part number, your manufacturer, and your manufacturer part number. So you never even actually have to fill that out on the part while you're creating it, which is kind of nice for you. And if you have any questions as we move along, of course, do not hesitate to ask those in the chat section. Now, let's get into actually creating a PO, because we now have our part set up with a supplier. So there's a few ways that we are going to go about creating our PO. So number one, we're going to create a manual PO. Number two, we'll create a PO from our parts reorder list. So that's when one of our items, when they're on hand, goes below a reorder point that we're going to set up. And then we'll also create a PO directly from a part. So to get started with the manual PO creation, we're going to head to the purchase order table. So that should be somewhere here in your navigation bar. And if you do not see it here, under your manage table section, that's going to allow you to move it from an available table over to your selected table section. Now, the first way to create this PO is to simply click on the Add New Record button next to Purchase Orders. and then it's going to take us to this blank screen here. Now, for our PO number, we can leave this set to auto, which will allow the system to automatically generate the next PO number in sequence for us. And then we just need to fill out information related to our supplier. So we'll go ahead and use that supplier lookup. Here's my supplier record that I just created. So I will check that and apply those changes. And then I can go through and fill out any of the other information that I had at this point. So if there was a work order number that this PO is related to, I can select that at this point. I can fill out shipping information, any additional comments about this PO, and maybe even the delivery date if needed. So I need this by Friday. And I can go ahead and save that PO. So once you save your PO header there, you can actually go on to your related tables. So again, you may have that as a tab here, but the related table name that you're looking for is detail lines. And you'll go to your detail line related table and you're going to add a new record there for every individual item that you'll be ordering. So I can go ahead and I can add a new record. And let's say I want to order the part that we were just working with. So let's say I want to order this mounted ball bearing. So I know my item number is X-Ray12. Awesome. So just to backtrack once in case you lost me here, I'm looking at that PO that was just created. Going back to the detail line related table, I'm adding a new record here. And this is where we're going to select that first item. So using the item number lookup, so I can click on the magnifying glass here, I can go ahead and search for that. So my X-ray, specifically X-ray 12. Awesome. So that's my mounted ball bearing. I can go ahead and check that off and I can apply the changes. Now, if you set up a cost on your part beforehand, that cost will carry over here. If you had a specific unit of measurement for the item that you're ordering, that would also carry over here. And I can go ahead and punch one in here, so maybe each. And then it's also important that I tell the system how many items that I'm actually ordering. So let's say I need 5 of these. Awesome. So I can go ahead and save that line, and I can go back. And then if there are additional items that I need to add to this purchase order, I can go ahead and add those as well. So I'll just select any item here. I'm running low on my exhaust filters, so I'll order a handful of those also. Let's see, 5. I'll go ahead and save that. Awesome. So now I have my PO created with 2 items that are being ordered. So that is the first way that you can go about creating your PO. The next way that I'll show you is directly from your parts reorder list. So what your parts reorder list is a section here tucked away under main menu, purchasing parts reorder list. And this is going to give you a list of all your items grouped by their supplier, where their on-hand amount is below the reorder point that you set up for them. So they'll be listed here, and you can easily go from this list to actually processing a PO. Now, in order to get the items to appear on this list, there's a bit of setup that you'll have to do beforehand that starts on the part itself. So let's go to my list of parts, and let's take a look at my door limit switch. So this part, I want the system to automatically order when my on-hand goes below 5, let's say. So the way you set this automatic reordering up is, number one, by having your stock item field on your part set to true, so just by checking that box. And then there's a few other fields that are going to come into play. So number one, you'll have your reorder point, and that's the level at which your parts cannot go below. So once your on-hand meets that, the system will automatically add that part to that reorder list. You also need to tell it how many items that it needs to reorder once it reaches that point. So you'll have your reorder quantity here. And then while we're looking at the part, I would also tell you that it's important to fill out your unit cost, because that will carry directly onto your PO. But so we have our stock item, we have a reorder point, we have a reorder quantity. And it's also very important that you set your supplier up for that part. So I have a supplier record here. I set up eMaint as the supplier of this item. I have my stock item set to true. I have my reorder point set to 5, and I will be reordering 10 once I reach 5. So I can easily perform an adjustment to take away a few of these items. So let's say I take away 2, which is going to leave me with 3 on hand, which goes below my reorder point. So now the system has saw this, and it's now going to try to process this as a PO. So now I can go back to the parts reorder list. So that is under main menu, purchasing, parts reorder list. I'll now see that supplier here. So I'll see my eMaint supplier. And if I click on the supplier name, it's going to list each of the items, each of my stock items where they're on hand are below the reorder point. So here I can now see that door limit switch. I can see that it's attempting to order 10, and I can see that a lot of the information is already filled out for me. So what I can do from this point is either check or uncheck individual lines to confirm whether or not I actually want to purchase those items. And then I can go ahead and process those checked items. Perfect. So once you process those checked items, the system is going to move this parts reorder list record into a different section called your pending POs. So now I can go back to main menu, purchasing center, then to update pending POs. And then I'll see a line here for the purchase order that I attempted to create. So I see my door limit switch. I see that 10 are attempted to be ordered. And from this point, I can click on the PO button to go ahead and assign this line to a PO. So as soon as you click on this button, you're going to see this pop-up come up. And what you're doing in this pop-up is just reviewing it to confirm that all of the items are there, and then you're assigning it a PO number. Again, if you leave it set to auto, the system will assign it a number in sequence. But if you have a specific PO number in mind, you can go ahead and input that also at this point. So I'll leave that set to auto, and I'll go ahead and assign the PO number. Awesome. So the system just now turned that pending PO into an actual PO, and it gives me the number here. So I can go ahead and copy that and close this window. Now I can go back to my purchase order master file, and then I'll see that there's this new PO already set up for the eMaint supplier, and that line is already on it. So 10 of my door limit switches already set up. So that covers creating a PO from the parts reorder list, and the last way I want to show you of creating a PO is directly from an item. So let's go to any item here. Boom, boom, boom. Here, I'll use my ball bearing again. So if you're looking at an item in eMaint, what you can also do is go to your actions, and then you'll have the option to purchase. And then from the screen, you can choose the quantity that you want to purchase. You can assign it to a PO that you've already created. So I could use my PO number 2 that I just set up, or I can leave this field blank and it will create another pending PO. And then I can also go ahead and I can process this at this point. Already exists for a different supplier. Oopsie. So sorry, I tried to create a PO for a different supplier. So I will go ahead, I'm going to leave this one blank, which will create a pending PO using the default supplier that I have set up. And then I can go back to my pending PO section. And then I'll see this item here. And again, I can process that as an actual PO if I choose to. Awesome. So now I have PO number 3. Awesome. So that's going to cover the different methods of actually creating the purchase orders. So we should now have 3 different POs here in the list view. So the first PO that I created manually from the PO list view, the second PO that was created from the parts reorder list, and then the third PO that was created directly from the item. Now, once you have a PO created and that's shipped off to your suppliers, now you're just waiting for the items to actually arrive. So once your items do arrive, you can go back into your purchase orders and you can begin to receive those items. So to receive an item from a PO, you'll need to open your purchase order, and under actions, you'll have the option here to receive. Now, once you choose the option to receive, you'll need to tell the system how many of each item that you're receiving. So let's assume that you received your entire shipment in bulk, so you received it all at once. We created this button down here in the left-hand corner for you called autofill, which will autofill the received quantity for you. And then you can go ahead and process it, and that's going to receive the entire shipment. So we'll go ahead and receive this one in that fashion. Actually, I'm going to receive one of my other POs. Awesome. So I go to my actions and receive. I'll autofill it. That's going to receive the 10. And then I can process it. Now, something you may or may not have noticed is before receiving this item, the PO's detail line was set to O for open. And once I've received it, it's going to change to a C for completed. So that's now going to complete this PO line. And once all of the lines have been received for a purchase order, that will actually close your purchase order. And you also have a status field for POs that you can add to your list view or form if you choose. And then that's going to show you the status. So that now closes this PO since I've received all of the items on it, whereas my first 2 POs, those are still open. Now, let's say you only receive a partial shipment of an item, but you still need to close the line. So in this instance, I ordered 10 of these switches, but let's say I only received 5 and I need to close the PO. Well, the way you'll do this is by receiving that 5, and then there's going to be a drop down that lets you change the status of the line to close, for example. So I can receive that partial quantity and still close that line. Awesome. So now that I've received that entire line, that should also close my PO. Boom. And then last but not least, a few other options that I want to show to you while receiving is the option to leave a packing slip memo. So if there's any memo you want to attach to the receipt, you can add that here. And then you can also modify the receive date of whichever item you're receiving. So if you received it a few days earlier, or you want to date it for the future, you also have that option. And then there's also a section here that allows you to add an additional dollar amount to the PO, to each line on the PO, that is. So let's say let's say there was an additional charge in the amount of $20 for shipping, tax, and everything included. So I can add that additional amount here, and then I can either distribute that across my lines based on the cost of each item, or I can distribute that based on the quantity of each item. So because there's 2 items on order and I'm adding $20 additionally, it's going to add $10 to each line. So that's how that one is going to work. And then you also have the option to reset those costs here. Now, once you begin to receive portions of a PO, the system will start to create receipt records for you. And you can view those receipts at any point by opening your purchase order, hovering over actions, and selecting view receipts. So from here, you're going to see a line for every individual receipt that you have. So if you received your purchase in bulk, you can see it that way. And I see we have a few questions here that I Didn't catch. Boom, boom, boom. Awesome. We're now using, boom, boom, boom. I can't see your screen. Oh, so Peter, looks like you weren't able to see my screen. Are you now able to see it? Yeah, question for Peter. And a lot of great other questions that I will be addressing towards the end. Will the PO print out your company logo and info? And quick question, will the PO print out your company logo and info? Yes, it can be configured to do so. So if that's something you're interested in, I would reach out to your customer success manager and that can be set up. Europe only. And the X4 version of eMaint will work in all countries. So you'll be able to use that in Europe also. So let's move along. So we've received a few items. We've reviewed our receipt. Now let's say I received a portion of a PO, as I've done here, and I actually did not mean to receive 10. I only received 9. So we've added a new feature in eMaint that's going to allow you to return those parts back to their inventory. So before we take a look at that feature, I just want to jump to this item that I received. And if I go to its part history, so that's a related table, I'll see 2 new transactions here. I'll see a transaction for the purchase. So I see that I purchased 10 of these items. And then I'll see the associated PO number. And once I actually receive those items, I will have a record of that receipt. So I can see that I received 10. Now, assuming that I need to return 1 item, I'll need to use this new return functionality. And to use it, there is an account setting that needs to be enabled beforehand. So you'll need to be doing this as the admin. But under your account settings and inventory control, scratch that. I'm sorry. The section is purchasing and requisitioning settings. There's an option here that says enable the PO return edit feature. And you can enable this, and that's going to give you that functionality. Boom. Sweet. So now I can go back to the purchase order that I received too many of. And I can now go back to my receipt, actions, view receipts. And then I will now have the option here to either return a portion of that receipt, or I can edit the cost of any of the items that I received. But in this case, I just need to return an item. So I will choose return, and then I will update that to 1. And I can go ahead and proceed. Awesome. And then I will have a receipt item for that 1 return. And if I go back to the item, I can look at the parts history, and then I will then see that PO return, and I'll see that 1 item was returned. And also, so you know, that is going to keep your on-hand updated. So as you purchase and receive your items or return them if you need, that's going to update your on-hand automatically. Awesome. Does eMaint have an approval option for POs based on the value of the PO? And yes, we have a question. Does eMaint have an approval option for POs based on the value of the PO? So yes, we have a feature called requisitioning in eMaint, and that allows you to set up different approval groups and approval limits and things. It allows you to go through that process before actually turning it into a PO. So that is called requisitioning in eMaint. And if you're interested about setting up requisitioning, just reach out to your CSM and they'll be able to give you more info about that. And yes, we can put electronic signatures on the form. You can actually turn any memo field in eMaint into a signature field. So yes, that can be set up also. Good question. So demonstrate automatic charges from receiving a line on PO. Now, something I want to show you here is what happens. Just giving a bit of head, but I want to show you what happens when you have a PO that's associated with a work order. So let's go back. Let's see. So I have this PO here. I haven't touched it yet. So I'm going to create a work order, and I want to attach this PO to that work order. So after this work order is completely fine, so I will use this. Let me copy its work order number. Now, if you go onto your PO while you're creating it, I told you you're going to have this work order number area where you can associate it with a work order. So I can use that lookup here. Give it some time because it's thinking. So I can use this lookup here now to search for my work order number. Awesome, and I can select that work order. Now, there's two different places where you can place your work order number. There's the field that's going to be on your PO header form, which is semi-important, but the really important field that you want to ensure that you have populated is actually on your detail line. So the system is actually looking here to this work order number field. So I'm just going to make sure I populate it in both. Now, the reason I have to populate it in both is because I didn't select the work order on the PO form beforehand. Because if I chose it here when I created the PO, every time I create a new line, it's automatically going to carry that work order number over for me. But since I did it afterhand, it's not going to do that. So, so this purchase order is now associated with a work order. So if I actually go and receive a portion of this PO, so let's say I'm receiving 3 of these, I can go ahead and I can process that. And then if I go back to my work order, what the system is going to do is it's automatically going to create a charge for me. Assuming I said, oh, my work order was closed. May help if you have an open work order. So let's go ahead and create a brand new work order. So test work order, order class, SAT. Awesome. So I have a work order here. I'll go ahead and copy this number. And I am now creating a brand new PO. And we got a good question here that I want to answer. Can you build your inventory by issuing POs, then saving what you ordered into your inventory? And unfortunately, you won't exactly be able to do that. So you're going to need your parts created in eMaint before you purchase them. So yeah, you're trying to make sure you have those records. Sometimes clients don't like actually creating the parts one by one, so they create a miscellaneous item that they use to purchase. But you do want to be in the habit of creating parts if possible for your organization. Awesome. So I'm now selecting my work order number for the PO. I'll go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and add the first line of the PO. PO. Awesome. So I'm just ordering one of this, and then I can go ahead and receive it now. I'll fill my order, and I can process that. And now, if I go back to my work order, I'll now have a charge associated with the work order, and the category of that charge will be a purchase to let me know that it came from a purchase order, and the system will automatically create that for you. And also another option that you're going to have with purchasing in eMaint is the option to create an invoice. So you have a related table that may not be present by default but can be added called invoices. So if for whatever reason you need to create an invoice for your purchase orders, you can go in here and you can set one up this way. So you can choose your invoice type, your quantity, rate, decide if it's taxable, leave a little memo there, and you can create that. So test invoice, let's get quantity 1. Awesome, and then you can print your invoice here and open that up as a PDF. Awesome. So this is just an example invoice without much information. And you can also create your invoices directly from your purchase order, which is also a great option. So you're going to have that same invoices table here, and you can set that up on this level also. Now, something again I want to emphasize is the fact that in order to actually associate your PO with your work order, the field that the system is looking at is the work order number that's on each individual detail line, not so much the work order number that's on the PO itself, although it's useful to put it here because that will auto-populate your detail lines as you create them. Awesome. Sweet. So that is how we can attach our purchase order to our work orders. So I see we have quite a few questions building up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start addressing some of these. So I'll try to work from the earliest to the newer ones. So what are new users? Just want to start using eMaint. All right, cool. So for the new users that are starting to use eMaint, we have a great weekly webinar that I definitely recommend you join. So if you want to join that, you can either look at our events page on eMaint.com or reach out to your CSM and they'll be able to get you signed up for that. How is adding Supplier info in the related table different from adding the Supplier on the first page? Good question. So we have a question about what's the difference between adding your supplier information on a part itself versus going to the related table. While yes, you can simply fill out your supplier information here when you're creating your part, the system really has no way of looking to that. The system is kind of set up to look at this supplier table. So you'll end up breaking a few different pieces of the pie if you do not create the supplier record when you're purchasing. So just to make sure the system functionality is all there, we ask that you use that related table. So that's why there's that additional step. I'm having trouble with items you purchase as packs, but parts issued out of eMaint. How to best handle this? So we have a user that it sounds like you're purchasing your items in in set quantities. So you're creating a kit essentially. So I need 2 of these, 1 of these, 3 of these to make this kit, and I want to purchase this kit as a whole. Well, in eMaint you have the option to create kits. So you can reach out to our support department or in our help center. So if you go to your shortcuts and your help center, if you search for kit, there's a section here on parts kitting. So this will talk to you about how you can set up a kit. And what you can do is purchase that kit, and then you can break that kit apart and update the on-hand of the kit items as needed. Now, is there any possibility to select currency? So by default, it is set up with US dollars, but if you need your account set up with a different currency, you can change your language selector here. And you can also talk to your CSM about your specific requirements for your country, and we can see what we can do for you. And again, we had a question about another country. So is X4 available in Europe? So yes, X4, if you have access to eMaint, you should also have access to X4. So if you're using the older X3 version of the system, if you switch to your navigation tab, under your main section, tapping on X4 should bring you into the newer version. And that is free of charge, in case you were wondering. So we're already using work to create and order parts as a way to tie them together. So to generate tie together, set generate POs that can help parts. So Joseph, you had a question, kind of a more specific question. I would definitely recommend reaching out to your CSM about how you can handle purchasing specifically for your organization, and I'm sure they can come up with a good solution for you. Here's out of items that do not have valid supplier, difficult to tell. Awesome. So I see someone else. They're currently in their parts reorder list when we went over that section, and they were seeing an error here. I'll probably have the same error, an error just like this that says the transaction cannot be processed without a valid contact record for the supplier. The reason you get that error message is because on the part, it was set up without going to that related table for the suppliers. So what was that, Sterilite? So those parts, they were set up. I'll find that part actually here. Supplier. Awesome. So the reason that happened is because the parts were set up. They do not have an item supplier, but someone just filled in the information here. And as you can see, when you do that, the system has no way of actually locating that supplier record. So you're going to see this issue. So the way you would fix that is by creating that supplier contact record, going back to the part, and then adding the default supplier. And once that supplier is created, you'll be able to go into the item in the parts reorder list. So yeah, we got two questions about approval processes within purchasing. So again, yes, that is 100% possible. It is called requisitioning. There's a bit of setup in your account that's required, so that's why I'm just recommending that you reach out to your CSM for that. Can you put electronic signatures on your POs? So to answer that question again, Edwards, yes. So if that's something you're interested in, I would reach out to support and we'd be able to add those fields in for you. Book orders. So the question was, when you return an item, will that reopen the PO? And unfortunately, no, that will not reopen the PO because you're returning it. Basically, it's a final transaction. So if you need to reopen the PO for whatever reason, what you'll want to do is add an additional line, and then you can reorder the quantity that you need to add to the PO, and then that will open your PO because you'll be adding an open line. So if you have two warehouses for a part, if you have two warehouse locations with the same part number in both locations, the on-hand quantity equal for both locations, how does the system know which location to reorder for? Do you have to make an adjustment to make the function work properly? So the system has some built-in logic, I know, to deal with that. What I would recommend for you, Laura, is reaching out to support, and we can clarify. We can give you more clarification. We can wrap in a product specialist to answer the specifics of that question. I sent to any place, example directly to my work site. So I have a question. When an item is purchased, can you send that purchase order, I'm assuming you're asking about, to any place? And the answer to that would be yes. So directly from your purchase order, you have the option to go to your actions, and you can email the purchase order, and then you can send that to any list of email addresses. So you can input an email, add a comma, and then start with your next email address and send that off to anyone. And we do have ways of automating the that process also. If we have an Excel document, is all of our parts, the parts numbers, is there a way just to upload the doc? All right, yeah, so that's a great question. So Joseph is asking if you have an Excel document that is filled out with all of the parts that you have, their locations, their on-hand quantities. Is there a quick way to load that into the system? And the answer to that would be yes. So if you take that sheet, we have a process known as an import, and we can import that entire sheet directly into eMaint. So it is a fairly simple process. So if you're interested in learning more about that, again, in our Help Center, you can head to, so under your Shortcuts Help Center. And for those of you confused what I'm clicking on, there's a little silhouette icon up here for shortcuts. And if you have your menu on the sidebar, Your shortcuts will be over here. And in the Help Center, you can search for import. And then this will talk about actually performing an import, or you can feel free to reach out to our support team who would be more than willing to assist you with the process. So the question is, if you have multiple parts that have the same supplier, is there a way that you can mass change those suppliers? So I will tell you yes, but you cannot do it directly from the UI. So you're not going to be able to select the items and mass change them this way. We'll have to perform an import for you to make that change. So that's something that you would want to reach out to either your CSM or support for, and we would be able to assist you with that. But it is possible. When does the purchase order document look like that the vendor receives via email? So if you're interested in seeing what the printout of a purchase order looks like, I can show you that here. So I'll open one of the purchase orders that we created. And then I can print it. And this is a copy of what the purchase order that your vendor would receive would look like. And this is the area that that you would add, say, your company logo or any additional information here. And then you can control a lot of the different areas in here. So this is what the final form that they receive looks like. Awesome. If you use for you. So there's a question, can a special document be added to the purchase order? So it sounds like terms and conditions. We can, through custom development, we can modify the PO form. So potentially, yes, we can add that additional text for you, but that is something you would want to reach out to your CSM specifically about modifying that. Handheld scanners for receiving products. Is there a possibility to use handheld scanners for receiving products? Yes, to a certain extent. If you have all of your items barcoded across your facility, you can use your scanner to input the item numbers in any place where you would type it. So in that sense, yes, you could use a handheld scanner, but there isn't an actual UI that allows you to just scan an item and receive it. But the nice thing about eMaint is that it's so customizable. If that's a feature that you're really interested in, if you reach out to your CSM, they'd probably be able to set up some type of development for you to make that feature possible. Payable invoice table functionality. So we have a question, what is the payables invoice table? So that's this invoice table here. If you use invoices now, you can use those now in eMaint. So you can add a record to it, and you can just fill out any of the necessary fields for your invoice. Because sometimes you may need to send that invoice out to the client or whatever the case is, so you can fill that out. Can we request to my manager return to request before we can see the PO? And yes, if you are using multi-inventory locations, you can receive parts to your specific locations. So in any area that you're selecting the part, you would also have the option to select the location, and you can receive it that way. Make sure I'm addressing all your questions here. Oh yeah, so I ran over this one, but can you add any additional charges such as tax to your purchase order? And the answer to that would be yes. So there's a few different ways about going about doing this. I've seen it done on each individual line. The tax is added here, so you'll have a taxable field to indicate whether the line is taxable. your tax rate, and then your tax amount, which is typically generated by the system. And then that is added to the PO. I have also seen customers, they create a part for additional costs. So let's just say you create an item called shipping cost. And then when you're creating your PO, you can add a new line for that shipping cost item and just input how much that cost. So yes, there are a few different ways about going about doing that. So I would recommend reaching out to support just to review your current situation and see what would work best for you. These are possibilities. And it looks like we're getting quite a few questions about specifics for different countries. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to your CSM for those questions, because they'd have better answers for you for your specific country. Boom, boom, boom. Can you build inventory? Boom, boom. Good. Good. If parts are needed. And yes, so the question is, if parts are needed for an upcoming PM, will a stock requisition be created to fulfill the need before the PM is created? And yes, if you have requisitioning set up, you can set up those stock requisitions. So a requisition is automatically sent out to your default approval queue and for approval, and then yes, it would be taken care of before the job. We've got multiple parts. Good. Awesome. So I will let you guys, if you have any other questions, feel free to add those into the chat. But I just want to go back over our PowerPoint. There's a few closing slides I'd like to share. So upcoming webinars. We have 2 upcoming webinars that you should know about. We have an advanced list view management and eMaint X4 that's coming up Wednesday, June 20th at 11 a.m. and I will be teaching that one as well. I'm actually really looking forward to that one because I think list view management is very important in eMaint, so keep an eye out for that. And then we have a best practice webinar coming up on the importance of leadership on the reliability journey, and that one will be June 13th, Wednesday at 11 a.m. with a few special guests. So if you'd like to sign up for either of those webinars, you can see those links here, or contact your CSM who will be able to register you. For any new users specifically, we have a new user training, and this is a weekly webinar that's held every Tuesday at 11 a.m. by Daniel Perez, who is a great support specialist here at eMaint. So he'll take you through all of the basics in eMaint. He'll talk to you about navigating, just a lot of a baseline use of the system. And it's a great course, especially if you're new to eMaint or just new to an organization that's using eMaint. It's a great learning opportunity right there. We also have a few boot camps coming up. We have a handful around the country. So we have Philadelphia and Houston coming up, and then we have quite a few boot camps on different subjects here in Bonita Springs. And if you did not have a reason to come down to sunny Bonita Springs before now, well, here's your reason. So if you can get any of those trips approved, it's a great time filled with a bunch of great learning material. So keep an eye out for those boot camps. And last but not least, we have our Accelerate conference coming up, probably one of our largest events of the year. So you can register today for only $795. So reach out to your CSM if you are interested in that. Like I said, this is a great time. We hold it at a resort here in Sanibel. Definitely worth the trip, I would say. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to your CSM. And they'll be able to address those concerns for you. Awesome. Now, I'm not seeing any new questions come in, so I'll give you guys a bit more time to ask those if you have them. And if not, we can go ahead and we'll end the session here shortly. So I'll give you guys a few more minutes. And for those of you leaving as we speak, thank you for coming. I appreciate everyone's time. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Awesome. You are more than welcome, Nelson. Last opportunity to ask any questions you have.
You have to do it because when I create my account, so my name is not tied to the actual user that Joe created.
Do you have a training to the Fluke mobile application? Yes, if you go into eMaint University, I believe there are a few different trainings there available. I can double check for you. But if not, I'm actually a Fluke Connect support tech also, so you can reach out to support and I can assist you with that. Let's see here. See, I have access to you. So Nelson, I'll tell you, I believe there is a training in eMaint University, but if not, just contact your CSM and they can set up something for you to walk you through using the application if need be. Perfect. Awesome. Well, it looks like everyone's gotten their questions out, so I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. Again, thank you everyone for coming. Hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.